Welcome back to another thrilling episode of Cheating Tales Lab. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from all of you. Make sure to stick around and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story as juicy as this one. Now, let's get into today's tale. A gripping story that will have you questioning loyalty, ambition, and just how far people will go for their desires. The warm glow of the setting sun painted the suburban streets of Willow Creek in a soft amber hue. This picturesque neighborhood, with its neatly trimmed lawns and white picket fences, was home to the Parkers, a family that seemed to embody the ideal of modern success. Yet, behind the polished exterior of their two-story colonial home lay the cracks in a marriage strained by ambition, secrets, and betrayal. Jonathan Parker, or John as everyone called him, was a 42-year-old financial advisor. With his neatly combed chestnut hair and an ever-present smile, he was the kind of guy people instantly trusted. Over the years, his hard work had earned him a reputation as someone who always delivered, whether it was securing a family's financial future or offering sound advice during turbulent times. But lately, John's once confident demeanor had started to falter. His wife, Lila, was everything you'd expect in a woman who ran the social scene of Willow Creek. At 38, she had the kind of elegance that made heads turn. A striking blonde with sharp blue eyes and a wardrobe that seemed plucked straight from a high-end boutique catalog. Lila wasn't just a mother to their 16-year-old daughter, Sophie. She was also the self-proclaimed queen of event planning, managing everything from charity galas to PDA fundraisers with unmatched efficiency. On the surface, they seemed like the perfect couple. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. It all began on a chilly autumn evening. John had just come home from work, a little later than usual, his tie loosened and his briefcase heavier than he remembered. Sophie was upstairs, headphones on, probably lost in her favorite true crime podcast. Lila, however, was nowhere to be found, not unusual given her hectic schedule. Still, something about the empty kitchen and the lingering scent of Lila's perfume made John pause. He called her name, but his voice echoed unanswered. Her car was in the driveway, yet the house felt eerily silent. Then, a text notification lit up his phone. Lila, out meeting with clients. Don't wait up. John frowned. The message seemed normal enough, but there was a coldness to it he couldn't quite place. The past few months had been full of moments like these, small, almost imperceptible changes in Lila's behavior. She was out more often, her phone glued to her hand, and their conversations had grown shorter, more transactional. And then there was the laughter. John remembered it vividly, the way Lila had laughed at something on her phone last week, her face lighting up in a way he hadn't seen in years. When he asked what was so funny, she brushed it off as a meme from a friend. But John couldn't shake the feeling that her smile wasn't meant for him anymore. The following weekend, things took an even stranger turn. John and Lila were hosting their annual autumn dinner party, a tradition they'd upheld since moving to Willow Creek over a decade ago. Friends, neighbors, and even a few of John's colleagues filled the house, their laughter mingling with the sound of clinking glasses and soft jazz music. As John worked the room, Lila seemed distracted. She was glued to her phone more than usual, her smiles not quite reaching her eyes. At one point, John caught her in the corner of the living room, whispering urgently into her phone. When she saw him approaching, she quickly ended the call and flashed him a tight-lipped smile. "Everything okay?" John asked, trying to keep his tone light. "Of course," Lila replied, her voice a little too sweet. "Just finalizing details for the charity auction next week." John nodded, but the knot in his stomach tightened. It wasn't like Lila to be secretive, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was occupying her thoughts far more than their dinner party. As the weeks went by, John's unease grew. He began noticing little things. A change in Lila's perfume, her sudden interest in fitness classes, and the way she'd disappear for hours under the guise of running errands. But it wasn't until he stumbled upon an unfamiliar name on their shared credit card statement that his suspicions took a darker turn. Hotel Lux? A $300 charge. John muttered to himself as he reviewed the statement late one night. The expense was dated 2 weeks ago, On a day Lila had told him she was volunteering at the animal shelter. When he confronted her the next morning, Lila didn't even blink. "Oh, that's for the gala planning committee," she said smoothly. "We rented the venue for a meeting. You know how these things go." John wanted to believe her. After all, Lila was known for throwing elaborate events, and the timing checked out. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Her tone was too rehearsed, her gaze too fleeting. Unable to shake his growing paranoia, John decided to take matters into his own hands. One evening, while Lila was in the shower, he hesitated at the sight of her phone charging on the nightstand. He'd never been the type to invade her privacy, but the weight of his doubts pushed him over the edge. His hands trembled as he unlocked the phone using her birth date. Scrolling through her messages, John found nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual exchanges with friends and colleagues. But as he was about to give up, a notification popped up at the top of the screen. Kingston, can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. John's heart plummeted. Who was Kingston? And what did they mean by last night? Before he could delve further, the sound of water shutting off in the bathroom jolted him into action. He quickly locked the phone and placed it back on the nightstand, his mind racing. The days that followed were a blur. John couldn't concentrate at work, the cryptic message from Kingston haunting his every thought. He began piecing together the fragments of Lila's behavior, the late nights, the unexplained expenses, the way she always seemed to be one step ahead of his questions. It wasn't long before John found himself parked outside Hotel Lux, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he debated his next move. He felt like a man possessed, torn between wanting to know the truth and fearing what he might uncover. And that's when he saw her. Lila emerged from the hotel lobby, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, her red dress hugging her frame. She was laughing, her head tilted towards the man beside her, a tall, broad-shouldered figure John didn't recognize. They walked to a sleek black car, the man's hand resting casually on Lila's lower back. John's chest tightened as he watched the car pull away, his world crumbling around him. The cracks in their marriage weren't just cracks anymore. They were a chasm, and John was standing at the edge, staring into the abyss. What would you do if you were in John's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for part 2 of this gripping tale, where John decides to confront the truth head-on. Trust me, things are about to get a whole lot messier. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. In our last chapter, John Parker found himself spiraling after discovering a cryptic text on his wife Lila's phone and witnessing her leaving Hotel Lux with a mysterious man. Today, we're diving deeper into the storm that's brewing. Stick around because this story is about to get even more intense. And hey, if you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab, your go-to spot for gripping stories like this. For John, the days after seeing Lila with the mysterious man felt like a bad dream he couldn't wake up from. He tried to convince himself that there could be an innocent explanation, but the memory of her laughter, so carefree, so genuine, cut him deeper than any confrontation ever could. At work, John's focus was non-existent. His usual precision and attention to detail were replaced by constant thoughts of Lila and the man he now referred to in his mind as Kingston. Even Sophie noticed the change. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked one evening as they sat at the dinner table, the silence between them louder than any conversation. John forced a smile. "Just a little tired, sweetie. Work's been overwhelming." Sophie nodded, but her concerned expression lingered. "Mom's been acting weird too," she said hesitantly. "Always on her phone. Is something going on?" The question caught John off guard. He wanted to shield Sophie from the truth, or at least what he suspected it might be, but her insight was sharper than he gave her credit for. "No," he lied. "Nothing's going on. Your mom's just busy with her events." That night, John couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Lila's soft breathing beside him feeling like a cruel mockery of the intimacy they once shared. His mind raced with questions. Who was this man? How long had it been going on? And most importantly, why? Unable to take the torment anymore, John made a decision. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to wait for them to magically appear. So, the next morning, while Lila was in the shower, he found himself sitting at the dining room table with his laptop, searching for private investigators. The first few options seemed sketchy, low-budget websites with pixelated images and vague testimonials. But then he stumbled upon a sleek, professional site for a firm called Insight Investigations. Their tagline read, "We uncover what others hide." John hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the Contact Us button. Was this really the path he wanted to take? Did he want to be the guy who hired someone to spy on his own wife? But then the image of Lila and M. Kingston flashed in his mind, and all doubts disappeared. Within an hour, John was sitting across from a man named Carter Pierce, a seasoned investigator with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Carter's office was sparse but organized, with a single framed certificate on the wall that read Licensed Investigator. "You're not the first guy to sit in that chair," Carter said, his voice calm yet firm. "And unfortunately, you won't be the last. Tell me what's going on." John poured out everything: the late nights, the credit card charge, the text message, and the scene at Hotel Lux. Carter listened intently, nodding occasionally but offering no judgment. "It sounds like you've got enough to suspect something," Carter finally said. "But suspicion isn't proof." "Do you want proof, John?" John's throat tightened as he nodded. "I need to know, one way or another." Over the next week, Carter worked quietly in the background while John tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. It wasn't easy. Every time Lila left the house, John's stomach twisted in knots, wondering where she was going and who she was meeting. One evening, Carter called. "John, we need to meet. I've got something you'll want to see." John's heart sank as he drove to the coffee shop where they'd agreed to meet. Carter was already there, a manila folder resting on the table in front of him. His expression gave nothing away as John sat down. "What did you find?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Carter slid the folder across the table. "Photos, timestamps, and a few financial documents I dug up." "It's not pretty, John." John hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were photographs of Lila and the man he now knew as Marcus Kingston. The images told a damning story: Lila and Marcus entering Hotel Lux together, sharing drinks at a secluded bar, and even a blurry shot of them holding hands in a park. John's hands trembled as he flipped through the evidence. "How long has this been going on?" "From what I can tell, at least 3 months," Carter replied. "Marcus is a high-profile lawyer, big firm downtown, married too. Though, based on what I found, his wife has no idea." John leaned back in his chair, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him. He'd suspected this, of course, but seeing it laid out so plainly was another thing entirely. "What do I do now?" John asked, his voice hollow. "That depends," Carter said. "Some people want revenge, others want closure, and some just want to protect what matters most." Back at home, John couldn't bring himself to look at Lila. She greeted him with her usual smile, but all he could see was the woman in those photos, the woman who had lied to him, betrayed him. The tipping point came 2 days later. John received an email from Carter with an attachment labeled "Phone Records." Lila. He opened it to find call logs and messages that left no room for doubt. Lila and Marcus weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. Lila, "Marcus, I can't keep living this lie. I need to end things with John." "Marcus, we'll do it together. Just a little more time." John stared at the screen, his vision blurring as anger and heartbreak collided within him. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. Lila wasn't content to quietly destroy their marriage. She was actively plotting to leave him for another man. The next morning, John decided it was time to confront her, but not before taking a few precautionary steps. He met with a lawyer, gathered all the evidence Carter had collected, and began preparing for the inevitable fallout. That evening, as Lila sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, John took a deep breath and joined her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. Lila looked up, her expression wary. "What's wrong?" John placed the manila folder on the coffee table between them. This is what's wrong. For a moment, Lila just stared at the folder. Then, with trembling hands, she opened it. Her face drained of color as she flipped through the photos and documents, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. John, don't, John interrupted. Don't insult me by trying to explain this away. I know everything, Lila. The hotel, the texts, Marcus. All of it. Lila's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she managed to say, I didn't mean for it to happen. John laughed bitterly. That's the best you've got? You didn't mean for it to happen? You've been lying to me for months. Lila, you've been planning to leave me. Don't you dare act like this was some accident. Tears filled Lila's eyes, but John felt no sympathy. I trusted you, he continued. I built a life with you, and this is how you repay me. Lila tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled away. John, please. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. No, John said, his voice cold. You made your choice, Lila. Now, I'm making mine. What's next for John and Lila? Will their marriage survive, or has the damage already been done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next chapter of this emotional roller coaster. Stay tuned. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming back for another intense chapter of Cheating Tales Lab. Last time, John confronted Lila with the evidence of her affair, and things got heated. Today, we're diving headfirst into the fallout of that confrontation. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. And before we get started, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any updates on this roller coaster of a story. For John, the silence after the confrontation was deafening. Lila sat across from him, her face streaked with tears, but John couldn't find any sympathy within himself. The trust they'd built over years of marriage had been shattered, and the weight of her betrayal hung between them like a storm cloud. What happens now? Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John stood, pacing the room. That depends on you. Are you going to keep lying? Or are you ready to come clean about everything? Lila hesitated, her eyes darting to the manila folder still on the table. I never wanted to hurt you, John. It just happened. John scoffed. It just happened? That's the best you've got? Do you think I'm stupid, Lila? Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice, over and over again. Her tears fell harder now, and she buried her face in her hands. For a moment, John felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by anger. He'd spent months doubting himself, questioning his sanity, while she'd been sneaking around with Marcus. You don't get to cry, he said coldly. Not after what you've done. Lila looked up, her face red and blotchy. I didn't plan for this, John. I was lonely. You were so focused on work, on providing, that you stopped seeing me. And Marcus, he made me feel wanted again. John froze, her words cutting deeper than he expected. Don't you dare blame this on me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I worked hard to give us the life we have. I sacrificed for this family. And you repaid me by sneaking around behind my back. It wasn't like that, Lila started, but John cut her off. Then what was it like, Lila? Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided I wasn't enough, so you went looking for someone else. As the days passed, the tension in the house became unbearable. Lila tried to talk to John several times, but he shut her down every time. He wasn't ready to hear her excuses or explanations. Instead, he threw himself into preparing for what came next. John's lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Claire, was both a source of guidance and a voice of reason. You've got a strong case for divorce, she said during one of their meetings. But you need to decide what your priorities are. Is it about revenge, or is it about moving on? John thought about it long and hard. Revenge was tempting. After all, Lila and Marcus had caused him so much pain. But Sophie deserved better. She didn't need to be caught in the crossfire of her parents' war. Moving on, John finally said. I just want to protect my daughter and rebuild my life. Claire nodded. Good. Then let's focus on that. Meanwhile, Lila's world was beginning to crumble. News of her affair with Marcus had started to spread, thanks to John's subtle but calculated moves. He hadn't told anyone directly, but Carter's investigation had unearthed enough evidence to suggest that Marcus wasn't as discreet as he thought. One evening, Lila came home to find John sitting in the living room with a grim expression. He slid a tablet across the table to her, the screen displaying an article from a local news site. Marcus Kingston under investigation for misconduct. The headline read. Lila's eyes widened as she read the article. It detailed allegations of unprofessional behavior, conflicts of interest, and rumors of an affair with a married woman. What is this?" she stammered. John crossed his arms. "It's called consequences, Lila. Did you really think there wouldn't be any?" Lila looked at him, a mix of anger and fear in her eyes. "You did this." John shook his head. "Marcus did this to himself. He's the one who crossed the line, just like you did." For Marcus, the fallout was swift and brutal. His firm placed him on leave pending an internal investigation, and his wife, Vanessa, filed for divorce. John had made sure Vanessa received copies of Carter's findings, including photos and messages that left no doubt about Marcus's infidelity. One afternoon, John received an unexpected call from Vanessa. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice cold but controlled. "I wanted to thank you for bringing this to my attention. Marcus always thought he was untouchable. Now he knows he's not." John felt a small sense of satisfaction. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "I'm not," Vanessa said. "At least now I can move on with my life." Back at home, John and Lila's interactions became increasingly strained. Sophie picked up on the tension, though neither of them wanted to burden her with the truth. But one evening, as John was tucking her into bed, Sophie asked the question he'd been dreading. "Dad, are you and Mom going to get a divorce?" John's heart ached as he looked at his daughter. "We're trying to figure things out," he said carefully. "But no matter what happens, Sophie, we both love you very much. That will never change." Sophie nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't want our family to fall apart." John hugged her tightly, wishing he could promise her that everything would be okay. But deep down, he knew there was no going back to the way things were. The breaking point came one night when Lila tried to justify her actions again. "You have to understand, John," she said. "I didn't feel like I had a choice." John exploded. "You always had a choice, Lila. You could have talked to me, gone to therapy, done anything other than cheat. But you didn't. You chose to betray me." Lila's defenses crumbled, and she broke down in sobs. "I'm sorry, John. I really am." But John couldn't bring himself to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What's next for John, Lila, and Sophie? How will this tangled web of lies and betrayal finally unravel? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned for the next chapter of Cheating Tales Lab. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Welcome back, everyone. Things are heating up in John and Lila's story, and we're inching closer to the climax. Last time, we saw the fallout of their confrontation, and the consequences started catching up with both Lila and Marcus. But if you think that was intense, buckle up, because this is where it gets even more dramatic. And hey, if you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling content. The days that followed were a whirlwind of revelations and heightened stakes. John, still reeling from Lila's betrayal, knew that protecting Sophie had to remain his top priority. But as more layers of deceit unraveled, the situation spiraled into something far messier than he could have anticipated. A surprise twist. Late one evening, John was combing through the stack of documents Carter had provided when he stumbled upon something that stopped him cold. Among Marcus's financial records was a transfer to an account bearing Lila's maiden name. The amount wasn't small, $15,000, labeled as a personal loan. John's pulse quickened as he stared at the page. What could she possibly need this much money for? He wondered aloud. The next day, John confronted Lila. She was in the kitchen, preparing Sophie's lunch, when he dropped the printout onto the counter. Care to explain this? Lila froze, her face draining of color as she glanced at the paper. It's not what you think, she stammered. Then enlighten me, John said, his tone sharper than he intended. Lila hesitated, the weight of her secrets pressing down on her. Finally, she exhaled shakily. Marcus helped me pay off some debts. John narrowed his eyes. What debts? We're not in financial trouble. Lila's voice wavered. They were personal debts. From before we got married. I didn't want you to know. John clenched his fists, his frustration bubbling over. So you lied to me. Again. I didn't think it mattered. Lila snapped, her composure cracking. It was my problem, and I handled it. John's laugh was bitter. Handled it? By getting into bed with Marcus. Literally and figuratively. Lila flinched at his words, tears welling in her eyes. You don't understand. You're right, John interrupted. I don't. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to anymore. Marcus hits rock bottom. While John and Lila's marriage continued to disintegrate, Marcus faced his own unraveling. His leave from the firm became permanent when the board discovered additional improprieties. The financial world was small, and news of his downfall spread like wildfire. Marcus found himself ostracized, his carefully curated image in tatters. One night, Vanessa, the wife he'd so cavalierly betrayed, showed up at his temporary apartment with divorce papers. She didn't bother hiding her disdain as she slid them across the table. You deserve everything that's happening to you, she said coldly. And just so you know, I've filed for full custody. Marcus's bravado faltered. Vanessa, let's not do anything drastic. We can work this out. Vanessa laughed, a harsh, joyless sound. Work this out? The way you worked out your midlife crisis with someone else's wife? No, Marcus. You made your choices. Now you'll live with the consequences. Sophie's heartbreak. Amid the chaos, Sophie remained heartbreakingly unaware of the full scope of her parents' conflict. But the cracks in their relationship became impossible to ignore. One evening, as John helped Sophie with her homework, she asked a question that nearly broke him. Dad, do you still love Mom? John froze, his heart aching at the sight of his daughter's innocent eyes. He wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that their family could weather this storm. But he couldn't lie. I'll always care about your mom, he said carefully. But sometimes, even people who love each other can hurt each other. Sophie frowned, her brow furrowing. Does that mean you're getting divorced? John sighed, pulling her into a hug. We're still figuring things out. But no matter what happens, I promise you'll always have both of us in your life. Sophie nodded against his chest, but her quiet sniffles told John everything he needed to know. The fractures in their family were hurting her more than she let on. The final straw. As the tension between John and Lila reached a boiling point, an unexpected visitor arrived at their door. Vanessa. She looked polished and composed, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling around them. I thought you might want to see this, Vanessa said, handing John a USB drive. It's everything Marcus tried to hide. Bank records, emails, even messages with Lila. John inserted the drive into his laptop, his jaw tightening as he scrolled through the files. It wasn't just financial dealings. There were intimate messages between Marcus and Lila that painted a picture of an affair far more calculated than he'd realized. They'd planned to leave their spouses and start a new life together. Why are you giving me this? John asked, his voice hard. Vanessa's expression softened. Because Marcus and Lila don't deserve to walk away from this unscathed. And because I know what it's like to feel betrayed. John nodded, his gratitude muted by the storm of emotions raging within him. Thank you. As Vanessa left, John turned to Lila, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of guilt and defiance. Anything you want to add? He asked, his voice ice-cold. Lila's shoulders slumped. I made mistakes, John, but I never wanted it to end like this. John shook his head. The problem is, Lila, you didn't just make mistakes. You made choices. And now we both have to live with them. The calm before the storm. As John prepared to take the next steps, He couldn't shake the weight of everything that had happened. His marriage was in shambles. His daughter was struggling, and the life he'd worked so hard to build had been upended. But amid the wreckage, John found a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Sophie's future and for the chance to rebuild his life on stronger foundations. And as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, John realized one thing with absolute clarity. The storm wasn't over yet. What's next for John, Lila, and Marcus? How will the climax of their story unfold? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for the next gripping installment. Welcome back, everyone. The tension has been building steadily, and we're finally approaching the most intense part of John and Lila's story. The stakes are higher than ever, and every decision they make now could change their lives forever. Stick with me as we unravel this gripping climax. And if you're enjoying the twists and turns, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Now let's dive in. The confrontation. John's patience had reached its breaking point. Armed with the USB drive Vanessa had given him, he spent the next 2 nights piecing together the full scope of Lila and Marcus's betrayal. The more he uncovered, the more determined he became to confront them both. The final straw came in the form of a text message. John had installed tracking software on Lila's phone weeks ago, a desperate move born out of suspicion. That evening, he received an alert. Lila had sent Marcus a message saying, "We need to meet. It's urgent." John's jaw tightened as he stared at the screen. If they thought they could continue plotting behind his back, they were sorely mistaken. The meeting. The following evening, John waited in the parking lot of a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Lila's car was already there, parked next to Marcus's sleek black SUV. Through the window, John could see them seated at a corner table, their heads bent close together. John didn't hesitate. He entered the cafe, the bell above the door chiming softly. Both Lila and Marcus froze as he approached, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. "Don't mind me," John said, his voice low but steady. "I just thought I'd join the party." Marcus recovered first, his usual smugness slipping into place like a mask. "John, this isn't what it looks like." John slammed the USB drive onto the table, cutting him off. "Save it. I know exactly what this is." Lila's eyes darted between the drive and John's face. "John, please." "You don't get to plead," John snapped. "Not after everything you've done." Marcus leaned back in his chair, trying to appear nonchalant. "Look, we all made mistakes. No need to make a scene." John's laugh was humorless. "A scene? You think this is about a mistake? You sabotaged my career, manipulated my wife, and lied to your own family. And for what? A bigger paycheck? A cheap thrill?" Marcus's bravado faltered. "It's not that simple." "It never is with people like you," John interrupted. He turned to Lila, his voice heavy with disappointment. "And you? I trusted you. I built a life with you. Was it all a lie?" Tears welled in Lila's eyes, but she didn't respond. Her silence spoke volumes. The turning point. John didn't wait for an answer. He slid into the seat across from them and opened his laptop, connecting the USB drive. "Since honesty seems to be in short supply, let me lay it all out for you." One by one, he displayed the incriminating files. Financial records, messages, and forged documents. Lila's face turned ashen as the full extent of her actions was laid bare. Even Marcus couldn't maintain his facade of confidence. "This is blackmail," Marcus sputtered. "No," John said coldly. "This is justice, and it's long overdue." As he spoke, the cafe's door opened, and Vanessa walked in. Her arrival was no coincidence. John had called her earlier, knowing she'd want to witness Marcus's downfall firsthand. "Vanessa," Marcus stammered, his composure crumbling. "This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," Vanessa replied, her voice dripping with disdain. She turned to John. "Did you show them the email drafts yet? The ones where they planned to frame you?" "I was getting to that," John said, his tone dry. The atmosphere in the cafe was thick with tension as John continued to outline their plan. Lila buried her face in her hands, while Marcus grew increasingly agitated. "You can't prove anything," Marcus finally said, his desperation showing. John smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "I don't have to. The court of public opinion will do the job for me." The fallout begins. Word of the confrontation spread quickly, thanks in no small part to Vanessa. Within days, Marcus's remaining professional connections severed ties with him, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. His financial dealings were flagged for investigation, and he faced potential legal repercussions for his role in the scheme. Lila, meanwhile, found herself isolated. Friends and family distanced themselves as the details of her affair and betrayal came to light. Even Sophie, who didn't know the full story, sensed the tension and began pulling away from her mother. For John, the fallout was bittersweet. He'd exposed the truth and protected Sophie from further harm, but the cost had been steep. His marriage was beyond saving, and the life he'd worked so hard to build was in ruins. A new resolve. In the weeks that followed, John focused on rebuilding. He moved into a modest apartment and began laying the groundwork for a new career. He also prioritized his relationship with Sophie, determined to give her a sense of stability amid the chaos. One evening, as they worked on a school project together, Sophie looked up at John with a small smile. "Dad, you're doing a good job." John's heart swelled at her words. They weren't much, but they meant everything. Lila's reflection. Lila, left alone in the house that once felt like a home, grappled with the consequences of her choices. The silence was deafening, and the weight of her actions pressed down on her like a stone. One afternoon, she found an old photo album tucked away in a closet. Flipping through the pages, she saw snapshots of a happier time. Family vacations, Sophie's first steps, anniversary celebrations. Each photo was a painful reminder of what she'd thrown away. For the first time in months, Lila allowed herself to cry. Not the self-pitying tears she'd shed during her confrontation with John, but tears of genuine regret. She didn't know if she could ever make things right, but she resolved to try, for Sophie if nothing else. A glimpse of hope. As the story approached its climax, it was clear that no one would walk away unscathed. But amid the wreckage, there were glimmers of hope. John's determination to rebuild his life and prioritize his daughter showed the resilience of the human spirit. And even Lila, faced with the full weight of her mistakes, began to take the first tentative steps toward redemption. But the question remained, could any of them truly move on from the betrayal that had shattered their lives? Stay tuned as we reach the final chapter of this incredible story. Will John find peace? Can Lila redeem herself? And what will become of Marcus after losing everything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dramatic recaps like this one. Welcome back, everyone. As we push deeper into the most intense part of the story, tensions are rising, relationships are fracturing, and decisions are being made that will shape everyone's future. If you've been glued to the twists and turns so far, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab as we head toward the explosive climax. Let's dive in. The court of public opinion. The fallout from John's confrontation at the cafe spread faster than anyone anticipated. In the age of social media, rumors and truths blurred together, painting a vivid picture of betrayal and deceit. John's calm yet scathing takedown of Marcus and Lila became the talk of the town. Vanessa, ever the opportunist, ensured the story reached the right ears, sharing snippets of the evidence John had uncovered. By the end of the week, Marcus's career was hanging by a thread. His clients began withdrawing their business, and the financial firm he worked for issued a vague statement about investigating internal misconduct. The prestigious image Marcus had cultivated for years crumbled in the span of days. Lila didn't fare much better. Her real estate business, once thriving thanks to Marcus's referrals, came under scrutiny. Clients began questioning her integrity, some even canceling contracts outright. For Lila, who had built her identity around her professional success, The loss was devastating. But for John, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming his dignity, his career, and his role as a father to Sophie. And though he'd made strides, the real battle was far from over. Marcus's desperation. Marcus sat in his office, staring at the notification on his phone. His firm had officially suspended him pending an internal review. He slammed the device onto his desk, the sound echoing in the once pristine space. "How did it get to this?" he muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He replayed the events of the cafe in his mind, each detail sharpening his anger and frustration. Vanessa had betrayed him. John had outmaneuvered him. Even Lila, his supposed partner in this sordid affair, was now a liability. Marcus realized too late that he had underestimated John's resilience. In a moment of desperation, he called Lila. When she answered, her voice was tense. "Marcus, this isn't a good time." "It's never a good time," Marcus snapped. "Do you have any idea how bad this looks? My firm's breathing down my neck, and your mess is making it worse." "My mess?" Lila's voice rose, incredulous. "You're the one who dragged me into this." "No," Marcus countered, his tone icy. "You were already sinking. I just gave you a lifeline." There was a long pause on the line before Lila spoke again, her voice quieter. "Then maybe it's time we both let go." Marcus didn't respond. He ended the call abruptly, his mind racing. He couldn't afford to let go, not yet. He needed a way to salvage what was left of his reputation, even if it meant throwing Lila under the bus. Lila's reckoning. For Lila, the walls of her life felt like they were closing in. Her once bustling office was eerily quiet, her assistant having resigned earlier that day. Even Sophie seemed distant, her once cheerful demeanor replaced by confusion and mistrust. One evening, while sorting through paperwork in her office, Lila found an old family photo buried in a drawer. It was from a beach trip years ago, back when she and John were happy, when Sophie's laughter filled their home, and their biggest worry was what flavor of ice cream to get. The photo felt like a relic from another life, a painful reminder of everything she'd lost. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Staying with Dad tonight. Don't wait up." Lila's heart sank. She typed out a response but deleted it before pressing send. What could she say? That she was sorry? That she wished she could undo the damage? The words felt hollow. As the evening wore on, Lila poured herself a glass of wine and stared out the window. She thought about John's words at the cafe, how they had cut through her defenses like a knife. She'd spent so long chasing success, validation, and excitement that she hadn't noticed what it was costing her. Now, with nothing left to lose, Lila made a decision. She picked up her phone and dialed John's number, a conversation long overdue. John was in the middle of reviewing job listings when his phone rang. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Lila." There was a pause on the other end before Lila spoke. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from." "You're not wrong," John replied, his voice neutral. Lila hesitated, struggling to find the words. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did to you, to Sophie. To us." John sighed, his grip tightening on the phone. "It's a little late for that, don't you think?" "I know," Lila said quickly. "I know I can't fix this. But I needed you to hear it." For a moment, there was only silence between them. Then John spoke, his voice softer than before. "Sophie deserves better. That's all I care about now." "She does," Lila agreed. "And I'll do whatever it takes to make sure she has a stable home." John's tone turned sharp again. "Then start by owning up to your mistakes. Not just to me, but to her. She deserves the truth." Lila's breath hitched. "I don't know if I can." "Figure it out," John said, his voice firm. "Because if you don't, I will." A battle of wills. The following week, Marcus made one last desperate attempt to regain control. He scheduled a meeting with his firm's executives, armed with a carefully crafted narrative that painted him as the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by John. But when he arrived, he was greeted by stony faces. The firm's legal team had reviewed the evidence John and Vanessa had provided, and there was no denying Marcus's culpability. "This isn't what it looks like," Marcus insisted, his voice rising with desperation. "Save it," one of the executives said, sliding a folder across the table. "Your resignation letter. Effective immediately." Marcus stared at the document, his vision swimming. He'd played the game for so long, manipulating others to climb the ladder, that he hadn't realized how far he'd fallen. As he left the building for the last time, Marcus felt the weight of his choices settle on his shoulders. For the first time in years, he was truly alone. John's moment of triumph. Meanwhile, John's life was slowly beginning to stabilize. With Vanessa's help, he secured a new consulting gig that allowed him to work flexible hours and spend more time with Sophie. His relationship with his daughter grew stronger by the day, and for the first time in months, John felt a sense of hope. One evening, as John and Sophie played a board game in their modest new apartment, Sophie looked up at him with a smile. "Dad, you're happy now, aren't you?" John paused, taken aback by her insight. "I think I'm getting there, kiddo." And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of his daughter's love, John realized he didn't need to win every battle. He just needed to keep moving forward. The climax of this story is almost here, and the final twists are guaranteed to keep you on the edge of your seat. Stick around as we see how John, Lila, and Marcus face the ultimate reckoning. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this. See you in the next chapter. Welcome back, everyone. Here we are at the end of this roller coaster of betrayal, redemption, and unexpected twists. We've seen lives unravel and others rebuilt, all while the consequences of deceit played out in dramatic fashion. Now it's time to wrap up the story and see where everyone ends up after the dust settles. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for more gripping stories just like this one. Let's dive into the conclusion. Lila's redemption. After weeks of soul-searching, Lila finally took John's advice. One evening, she sat Sophie down in their living room, the weight of her actions pressing heavily on her shoulders. "Sophie," she began, her voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you." Sophie looked up from her book, her expression wary. "What is it, Mom?" "I haven't been honest with you," Lila admitted. "About me, about your dad, about why things have been so hard lately." As Lila spoke, she didn't sugarcoat her mistakes. She explained her affair, her greed, and how those choices had driven a wedge between their family. She braced herself for anger, for tears, for rejection. But Sophie, wise beyond her years, surprised her. "I already knew," Sophie said quietly. "I just didn't know if you'd ever tell me." The words hit Lila like a punch to the gut. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for everything." "I know," Sophie said, her voice steady. "But I still love you. I just want you to do better." For the first time in months, Lila felt a glimmer of hope. She promised Sophie she'd work on rebuilding their trust, one step at a time. Marcus's collapse. Marcus, meanwhile, was facing a harsher reality. Without a job, a reputation, or a support system, he spiraled into isolation. His attempts to control the narrative had backfired spectacularly, leaving him as the scapegoat for the scandal that engulfed his firm. One rainy evening, Marcus stood outside the office of a former colleague, hoping to make amends. But when the door opened, he was met with cold indifference. "You made your choices, Marcus," the man said before shutting the door in his face. Alone in the rain, Marcus realized he had no one to blame but himself. He had built his life on lies and manipulation, and now he was paying the price. With nowhere else to turn, Marcus packed his belongings and left the city, hoping to start anew in a place where no one knew his name. John's new beginning. For John, life was finally looking up. With Marcus and Lila's betrayals behind him, he poured his energy into his new consulting job and, more importantly, his relationship with Sophie. They spent weekends exploring parks, playing games, and rediscovering the joy of simply being together. One Saturday morning, Vanessa stopped by for coffee. She had become a close friend and ally during John's ordeal, and her wit and warmth were a welcome addition to his life. You're smiling a lot more these days, Vanessa noted as she sipped her drink. Yeah, John admitted. I guess I finally feel like I'm in control of my life again. Vanessa smiled. You deserve it, John. You've been through hell, and you came out stronger. As they chatted, Sophie joined them, showing Vanessa a drawing she'd made of their new family dynamic. In the picture, John, Sophie, and even Lila were standing together, smiling. It was a reminder that while the past couldn't be erased, the future was theirs to shape. Lila's new path. True to her promise, Lila began making amends. She sold her luxury car and moved into a modest apartment, using the proceeds to pay off debts and support Sophie's education. She enrolled in therapy, determined to confront the insecurities and ambitions that had led her astray. At first, the work was grueling, but over time, Lila began to find peace in the small victories, earning Sophie's trust bit by bit, reconnecting with old friends she'd neglected, and rediscovering the values she had once cherished. One day, while visiting John and Sophie, Lila noticed a framed photo on the wall. It was from their beach trip years ago, the same one she'd found buried in her desk. Seeing it there, in John's home, reminded her of what they'd shared and what she'd lost. As she said goodbye that evening, she turned to John. Thank you for pushing me to face the truth, she said. I'll always regret what I did, but I'm grateful for this second chance to do right by Sophie. John nodded. We're all just trying to figure it out, Lila. One day at a time. A future rewritten. Months turned into a year, and the lives of everyone involved continued to evolve. John and Sophie thrived in their new routine, building a home filled with love and laughter. Lila, though no longer part of John's life romantically, remained a dedicated co-parent, ensuring that Sophie had the stability she needed. Marcus, on the other hand, remained a cautionary tale. His whereabouts became a mystery, his name fading into obscurity. A fitting end for someone who had built his empire on the ruins of others. As for Vanessa, her friendship with John blossomed into something deeper. Their shared experiences created a bond that neither of them had expected, and over time, they began to imagine a future together. It wasn't rushed or dramatic, just two people finding comfort and joy in each other's company. Final reflections. In the end, this story wasn't just about betrayal or revenge. It was about resilience, growth, and the power of facing the truth. John learned that his worth wasn't defined by the people who betrayed him, but by how he chose to rise above their actions. Lila realized that ambition without integrity was hollow, and that true success came from the love and trust of her daughter. And Marcus? Well, Marcus served as a reminder that deceit and manipulation are never sustainable foundations for a life. As the sun set on this chapter of their lives, each character carried forward the lessons they had learned. For John and Sophie, the future was bright, a testament to the strength of a father's love and the unyielding hope for a better tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If this story moved you, inspired you, or kept you hooked, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for more stories of love, betrayal, and redemption. Until next time, take care. And remember, the truth always has a way of coming to light. See you in the next video.